And one more time, welcome to everyone who's joining. I know that we had registrations all the way from the US, where is your morning? So good morning, and all the way to Australia, where is actually evening. So thanks for spending your evening with us. Mark is also currently in Australia, so you can see how happy he is to spend his late afternoon with Eir. And in Finland, we are
It's
heading
9:30 p.m.
towards the end of the Friday working day after this webinar. So I hope that you enjoy time with us today. Feel free to message to the chat where you're joining from and say hello to others, and feel free to share your name or your company name if you want to network with other people. And for Q&A, please post your question in the Q&A so that we can see the history of the questions and track which questions have been answered live and which questions have not been answered live. But I think we are now on time, and there is nothing that prevents us from starting this webinar officially. So hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. We are here today with Eir Accelerator, and we want to host this Zoom Q&A session to answer your questions and to share a little bit of updates of what we've been working on so hard over the summer and hear a bit more from our guests. So in case you don't know me, I'm Anastasia Markvardi. I'm head of Eir program. And behind the scenes, we have Heta, who is on my team, project manager, and she's helping you in the chat and with the questions. So with that, welcome once more to the session. And what we're going to do today, I will take 10 or maybe even less minutes just to give you a very short update of where we are with Eir and what we're working on right now. And then we have two wonderful guests who can share short introductions of who they are and what they're doing. And then the rest of the time we can dedicate to your questions. I hope it works for you. So quick update. We've been really, really busy over summer. We didn't really have proper vacation like many people do in Finland here. And we've been receiving an enormous amount of applications and interest towards Eir, for which we're super, super grateful. We're really thankful for everyone who submitted their application to Eir, because we're really honored to receive your interest and to meet your company and to consider your company to join Eir. And in fact, we have arrived at 45 countries present across our applications pool, and we are super proud of this. This really exceeds our applications. Of course, there are a lot of applications from the US, and we are again really honored that Finnish market is interesting for them too. There are a lot of applications from lots of other countries, all the way from Australia, Asia, Europe, and around. And we even have one application from Madagascar. I don't know if you're listening to us today, but thanks for applying. That's really amazing to have everyone. We have a very diverse pipeline of companies. They cover all kinds of modalities in women's health, from therapeutics, bio, to devices, to digital, to telehealth, and we are working really hard to evaluate those applications. We're aiming at least three reviewers per each application, and by reviewers we mean humans. So we are really making sure that each application is fairly considered from different perspectives, and we are now starting to reach out for an interview. Please be patient. We have already sent some invites to the companies. And by the way, not everyone has gotten back to us. So maybe if you're still waiting for the invite, it's worth checking your email or your spam folder. But otherwise, it will take us some time. So please stay patient, and we're trying to get in touch with you as soon as possible. I really wanted to highlight this because we focus on women's health, but we also really value female founders. And as you can see, our data is amazing. So 87% come of applications come from all female or mixed teams. And this is a really great statistics for us. Of course, we want to encourage female founders too, even if our main focus is women's health. And also, this was important for me to mention that the team behind Eir is a full female team of 4 people, and our advisor Jessica is also joining us as a, let's say, fifth woman here. We have worked on our investor network. We are super proud to have more companies joining, more VCs joining. So for now, we count with all these amazing partners and VCs all the way from Finland, Europe, UK, US, and other countries. And we really value their interest and participations. We were really proud to receive incoming requests to join. So if you are still considering, please go to our website. We have a very easy form to fill in to join our network, and we can discuss with you which would the way to engage would be the best for you. Likewise, we are working hard to onboard more and more partners, so the list is growing. And of course, it's not the final list. More companies and organizations will be added, but we are really increasing our outreach to the organizations in a very diverse women's health ecosystem, from hospitals, healthcare providers, pharma, biobanks, international associations, and foundations on women's health, and so on and so forth, and of course, universities. So we are really happy to have those, and many more will be added, and there are many more connections and partnerships we are finalizing behind the scenes. Good news, the applications are still open for another 2 weeks. So please, if you were still considering applying for Eir, there's still time to do so. Just go on our website and apply. We will be closing applications by the end of summer. So 1st of September, we will be closing the platform. And we are still looking for great companies in women's health to join. And to remind you, we define women's health as conditions that affect women exclusively, disproportionately, or differently. So if you're addressing women's needs in any therapeutic area, you're more than welcome to join us. Just as a caveat here, I'm not going to cover the full program and our approach, because I have already covered this in our online webinar together with Jessica Federer when we were doing the kickoff of Eir in June. And you're welcome to go to this video on YouTube that we can share in the chat and watch the webinar for more information about the program and our approach. So this is just to remind you that while we're closing the applications in September, we will be proceeding very actively with evaluating those. And in November at Slash, we will be kicking off our program here with all these wonderful startups and guests, including Jessica Federer, and Marco here represents Innovestor, who will host our event, and we will hear about it more just in a few seconds. So I think I've been talking for quite enough now, and I'm super happy to have 2 guests joining today to talk a bit more about VC's interest in women's health. And if you joined us a little bit too late and you want to ask why there are 2 men joining us as guests, please go back to the part where I was introducing our team of Eir and how many applications we have that are coming from female founders. Also because we think that women's health needs everyone, both women and men. And we also think that is very valuable to hear from VCs who are not yet fully focused on women's health, or let's say who are starting to invest in women's health, but coming from the life science perspective, because I think that represents one of the big trends in women's health in general. Alongside vertical funds that are focusing only on women's health, we see more and more healthcare investors paying attention to women's health. So that's why today we want to ask them why they're doing this. So let me just stop sharing here so that I can see you. And I would like to start with Marco from Innovestor. Marco, please welcome. And so the stage is yours. We're really looking forward to hearing from you why you're joining Eir and what is your interest in women's health.
Thank you, Anastasia. And it's such a pleasure to be here. And I think I am feeling nervous because I'm talking to an extremely educated and informed audience, which is sort of not always the case. But in this case, I think that's exactly how it is. And thank you, Anastasia, for inviting me. I think we also, I don't even remember how many years back we go together, but several years back, I've had the pleasure of knowing Anastasia. And obviously when she approached me and spoke and told me about Air and the plans behind it and what they were planning. I thought that this is something that is absolutely needed. Now, what I didn't anticipate when I heard about that is the volume of interest that the program has seen. And this is not a negative, but Anastasia, the interest that you've gotten in terms of the number of applications and everything around that is just it's it's been a very, very positive surprise, and I'm very happy to see that. Uh, I'm Marko Kuisma. I'm a partner at Innovestor Life Science. We are a Finland-based but internationally operating venture capital fund. We do early stage investments. So sort of in terms of funding round stages, we do all the way from inception, pre-seed, seed, Series A, and opportunistic to Series B as our entry point. Still, it's a pretty broad entry area, but it's still early stage companies. And so what that means in terms of different kinds of companies, when we talk about tech companies, we can enter at sort of all the way from inception to, let's say, early revenue or early growth. When it comes to therapeutics, we can enter preclinical uh, up to, I don't know, phase 2B studies. So there's quite a bit of a range in terms of the companies that we have an interest in from a fund perspective. And as Anastasia already said, we're not a women's health focused fund. We're a life science focused fund, and we more specifically we focus on science-based uh, innovations in therapeutics and digital health. And I think some call science-based digital health deep tech and so be it. But those are sort of the focus areas that we we focus on. Uh, we also, as you wanted to maybe mention, I mean, it's we are, or let's put it this way. I am happy and I'm proud to be in a team that is actually gender balanced, that is actually gender equal in terms of our team composition, in terms of our partner composition, in terms of our incentive composition, in terms of everything. And I wanted to say that because that's not always the case. When you look at the venture capital funds, when you look at the people behind venture capital funds, it is male dominated. It's a male dominated industry, which is a shame. When you look at the amount of when you look at the composition of teams of startups that we see that sort of fundraise and want to meet us, I think it's absolutely the inverse of what Anastasia showed earlier in terms of team composition in Air. And I think that's something that reflects reality, and that's something that we're interested in changing as well. We're interested in doing our part. We believe also that a lot of a part of the change stems from uh, encouraging female entrepreneurship. That's an area where we've been quite active. We're running different programs. We've launched a program called Future Female Founders, where we bring together networks and try to encourage, especially science-based, academic-based female foundership. We are a member of a network operating across the Nordics called WILD, which stands for Women in Life Sciences. And one of my partners, Milla Korsinaho, is running that program in Finland. So we're definitely actively focusing on changing some of the systemic issues. Now that's of course separate from women's health. Now I was talking about women entrepreneurship, but I think there are links. When it comes to women's health, I think that why we're interested in that, we're sort of intrigued and we're increasingly intrigued by that area, is that we also see shifts in the broader market. Uh, one of the one of the challenges is that obviously I don't need to start sort of educating on the fact because this is you all know that when it comes to clinical trials, when it comes to representation, it's male based, right? The sort of modern medicine is built on science and trials that are done with male participants, and of course that creates a lot of issues. We're seeing a change in that, obviously. We're seeing a change on that driven by regulators, but we're also seeing changes driven by the markets, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, I'm Finnish. I come from Finland, and I would consider that Finland is one of the front runners in sort of equality. and I would certainly hope so. Uh, Endometriosis is a good example. It's a disease that really has significant quality of life and other consequences for approximately 10% of women in the reproductive age. So it's a very, very, very significant disease area. And even in Finland, there's no guideline, there's no medical guideline for the diagnosis and treatment of endometriosis. And the amount of people it affects is very high. So we're talking about systemic issues, and what we're also talking about is uh, or our fundamental business opportunities, and obviously that's where the investment angle comes in. So whenever we and sort of take my word for it, whenever any investor, whether they're focused on women's health or whether they're focused on any other area, they always consider the business opportunity ahead, right? So that's sort of common for every venture capitalist or other financially driven funder out there. And that's also something that we do. But we also see that there's an arbitrage opportunity, and I took endometriosis as an example. So we also know that that's a condition that is underdiagnosed, severely underdiagnosed. One of the issues why we believe that's the case also is that there hasn't been sufficiently good treatment options for that disease, right? And when we discover and when we fund treatment opportunities that make also financial sense, like in the case of endometriosis, we believe that there's a huge financial incentive to treat from a health system perspective. We also think that that will drive more efficient diagnostics of these diseases. And that was obviously one example, but we quite firmly believe that we need to discover better ways to treat and manage diseases that affect women exclusively or disproportionately or differently, like Anastasia put it. And we also believe that that will partially be an unlock then from a systemic perspective to have an incentive to more accurately identify and diagnose those conditions. So we believe that that's sort of a virtuous cycle. So a lot of these opportunities that we see, and we're taking baby steps, right? We're taking baby steps in this area. As I said, because we aren't exclusively focused in the area, but I will say that we are sort of increasingly interested, and we're not the only ones who are for a good reason. And I would just maybe like to close out in saying that I think it's about time. So thank you for the opportunity to introduce.
Thank you, Marco. It's great to hear your perspective as a Finnish-based VC. Again, I think it's good to have multiple perspectives here from different sides of the world as we are moving over to Mark now. But maybe short follow-up question. I know that we have a lot of companies here who either want to apply to Eir, who already applied to Eir, and of course they're eager to look for investors. So which companies would be the best fit for you? Like, do you have anyone that you would say, hey, yes, that would be a better fit for investor, some therapeutic areas, some stage, or something interesting that you're really looking for in the program?
Yeah, that's a good question. So completely therapy area, completely modality agnostic. As I said, we focus on therapeutics and we focus on digital health. From our perspective, we focus less on medical devices, sort of physical medical devices, but there's a world of great investors out there who focus on that area as well. Uh, from a stage perspective, I already said where we're focusing, so early stage and I'd like to emphasize the sort of science-based aspects. You had a good logo list already that you showed, Anastasia. There were sort of a lot of our friends, a lot of people that we've co-invested in that have a bit of a different focus than us. We focus quite heavily on science, so we really appreciate and want to see sort of background science, hopefully a scientific innovation driving whatever the company is doing, whether that's in drug development or digital health. So we are less interested ourselves in perhaps sort of business to consumer models and sort of less scientifically driven startups. And not that they would be sort of less interesting overall, but that's just sort of our focus.
Yeah, thank you, Marco. And it indeed aligns with the with the view of Eir too, because we are also modality agnostic. We accept both like devices or bio companies, but also digital or maybe more of a wellness angle companies. But indeed, we want them to be rooted in science. Thank you very much. And I think I'll move on to Mark now. Mark, welcome to the stage. And would you like to introduce yourself and Suncoast and why you're here with us?
Thank you, AM. Really enjoy the Eir Accelerator, and also let me know if my Wi-Fi cuts out. Sorry, Sydney is unstable. Yes,
You went on mute though.
I'm Mark. I work on Suncoast Ventures, and also to everything Marco said, I actually do a lot of work in endometriosis economics. Like I'm a health economist, so that's something that Suncoast thinks is really important. Is science, much like what we talked about. Like we also want science in our moats. But we also look very early at where the health economics are because women's health has been so understudied that the reimbursement and regulatory pieces, a lot of time, really more reimbursement. They're not well broken out. Like a lot of times there's not good economics in this space. So the cost of illness is a little opaque to a lot of investors, and the reimbursement landscape, particularly in the US, where that is often make or break for your financials, is not as clear. So we talk about how we invest in billion-dollar problems where the solutions are hiding in plain sight. And we see women's health as not only a key area there, but it actually is a key driver of our value proposition and of the return profile we made in Fund One. Of 11 of our 21 investments were in women's health. And we also have segmented, like I've done a lot of work looking at our disproportionate, different, and solely, we would love to, we do pre-seed through A. We would, and kind of like Marco said, we will opportunistically look at a Series B company, usually more following on, but we really work hard to come alongside founders and add value as much as we can. Like we like to say, we find founders that don't need our help and then help them as much as we can possibly help them. So especially in areas like women's health, or as Marco was talking about, the life science, like obviously I'm in Australia right now, but we're an American fund. Well, that's because the clinical trials here are like 43.5% more capital efficient up to, so we like to help do everything from help people structure their trials, go to markets. We'll do like financial analysis, help them with health economics to make sure that they have everything they need to be successful. And we care a lot about women's health in particular. My general partner, Jen, recruited me because I've done a lot of women's health economics and continue to do a lot of that work. And then we have another health economist, my buddy Evans. So like this to us, we think is kind of what helps tie it together, is to build the economic case and then to do the value story, because the exclusion of women from clinical trials means all the way down in the value funnel. It's not well understood just how much leakage there is. And when we understand where in the pipeline, it's like, hey, these are places where you're under allocating investment and you're estimating how much the costing is, then you're going to have missed opportunities to not only drive value, but also to make the world a better place. So at Suncoast, we really believe in investing in things that are going to make a return, but also a social return, which is, again, why we can use health economics to qualify things like quality adjusted life years, or like incremental cost effectiveness ratios, to be able to marry the two things together. And then, within women's health, like I'm very interested in endometriosis because I'm extremely deep in that space. We care a lot about chronic pelvic pain, pelvic in general. And, we look at everything in life science except for cancer therapeutics. But across the space, much like Eir and Innovestor, we are agnostic. If it's a med device, a diagnostic, a therapeutic, we're underwriting a new form of cell and gene therapy, everything from extremely cutting edge scientific work to things that are just improvements in the workflow. Although we like science, we do underwrite, like, some caregivers also really important to us. And of course, caregivers are a women's health concept, considering women are about 2/3 of the caregivers. So things that improve on many aspects. And as a final thought, we kind of invest based on what we call the value pyramid, which is like the base layer is science. Like you have to have good science. If you have science at all, it needs to be good. And then you have healthcare, right? Where it's like, where's the workflow risk, the adoption risk? Are the doctors and nurses and the frontline clinicians going to like your product? But then we see healthcare, health economics and finance as the same layer. because the health economics informs how you do the valuation. And particularly, a lot of my work is to use health economics to drive those valuation arguments. And we find in women's health, there's probably the most powerful arbitrage opportunity because investors just have not invested in it. They haven't studied it. And frankly, that means that there's a lot of opportunity to make the world better and to make returns doing it. And so that's what we believe at Suncoast.
Thank you, Mark. There are actually some questions that I can throw at you right now. There were two a bit similar questions that maybe you could answer about science. And actually, one came from a digital health company, and another one came, they say, pre-seed stage company in women's digital health. So, yeah, actually, also digital. They both asking what evidence exactly you would like be looking for in terms of potential investments. And here there are some examples like product usage, clinical validation, revenue, partnerships. And another question also covers like which exactly clinical validation milestones you would consider. So those are, two similar questions.
Yeah. Okay. So, for one thing, we look at founders holistically. Like a lot of founders are spiky, and that's just most people are spiky, right? They're good at some things, they're not as good as other things. And so there's a few things. One thing is, we're very concerned with like the founder quality itself. Like, are you coachable? Do people like you? Do they want to work with you? Do we feel like you can lead people for 10 years, 15 years? Do we want to work with you for 10 or 15 years? Can we introduce you to all of our partners and immediately been like, oh, I love this person, you know? So I think somebody mentioned Trellis. So for clarity, I was not there when they made the investment in Trellis. I joined around fund two, but I have met the leadership team and they are killers. Like they're the kind of people that you talk to and you're like, oh yeah, I believe that you can get this done. But in terms of what kind of evidence we look for, it really depends on where you are in this phasing, how deep tech you are across the spectrum, and what the asymmetric risk profile looks like. Some of our more usually we don't invest in clinical stage. We usually don't invest until people are at least like 18 months out from commercial or about to do first in humans. But there are exceptions where the founders were like, we have a founder he was an investor and had 9 unicorns. And so it's like, well, we felt more comfortable with him, even though he's earlier, because he's done it a lot with companies. He's taken companies public. But we also have founders where, like as a first-time founder, we generally do want to see a little more traction and validation. But in terms of like what we're going to expect from a therapeutic versus a digital diagnostic versus a health tech, these are all different evidence levels. And ultimately, we want to understand, is this asymmetric risk? And can we actually add value? Because we like to be investors that are able to really help founders. We deeply enjoy working with our founders, but we also believe that a lot of our alpha comes from being able to come alongside them and help them with the 1,000 problems that founders have on an everyday basis. So we are more reticent to work with in areas. That's why we don't do cancer therapeutics, where we feel like we just do not understand the space enough to add value. Does that answer the question? I hope.
And yeah, thanks for your thoughts here. And Marco, maybe you want to jump in
Sure.
because I think you see the Q&A. I'm referring to both questions from
Sure.
Inga and Tomas
Yeah.
because they're kind of covering the same thing. Maybe you want to contribute about which clinical validation and
Yeah.
milestones you're looking
Yeah.
at.
So the answer is not going to be super clear cut, but when it comes to therapeutics, there's always background science. So that sort of inherently fits the science-based bucket. Uh, Digital health from our focus area perspective is of course different. And when we look at the companies operating in digital health, it's only a small fraction that one way or the other stem from academic research or science. And of course, that's sort of one interest bucket for us, that it actually has a unique scientific foundation. But there's an ocean of other opportunities which still may be interesting for us. And if we look at the investment portfolio of digital health that we have, it's sort of a mixed bag. From the in the digital health space, I think for us, it's sort of coming back to what Mark said. I just sort of echo the statement of investing where we feel that we actually understand stuff, and where we feel, and from a team's perspective, where we feel we're a team of scientists, science-based entrepreneurs, medical doctors. So that's the world that we understand, and we like things where we believe that clinical evidence, scientific evidence, is actually an important moat, a commercial moat going forward, right? So it doesn't necessarily need to be background science. It also can be foreground science, but it can be sort of greenwashed or whatever we want to call it, sort of greenwashed foreground science. So we want to identify and invest in opportunities where we believe that there's a fundamental good chance to generate solid scientific and clinical evidence that actually is relevant for the business model and that builds a moat, builds a commercial moat.
Thank you. I think that was a great perspective from both of you. So let me just mark those questions answered, and we can move ahead with a couple of more. There is a question for Mark about Suncoast investment in Trellis. I don't think, Mark, you can really discuss investments here, but maybe you can just in general comment about the opportunity here, because the question is about what made this company stand out and why you were interested in them.
Yeah, again, I wasn't there when they invested in her, but I do know Estelle. Like we were on a panel together like a month ago, and Estelle is just an amazing founder. She had done a lot of work at Illumina, like was the record for the largest contract at Illumina. So we had seen that Estelle in her corporate space had been extremely successful. And from what I understand of when we looked at it, it was also, I think Tammy Mahaney, who's one of the venture partners, sourced it. So Tammy has a clinic when she's a DNP and has her women's health clinic. And Tammy basically likes to see things that she herself would want to put in the clinic because she's extremely protective of her patients and doesn't really want to ever bring in anything unless she feels extremely comfortable that this is something that's going to change the way we do innovation, and particularly in this case, it's maternal health. But I think what it really came down to, we have deep faith in Estelle. Tammy had faith in the technology. And then MFM, maternal fetal medicine, is an area where we have good expert networks and good KOLs and are able to like add value, basically.
Thank you, Mark. I hope this gives a good understanding and idea of this particular very specific questions. And there are some questions in general about early stage companies and what makes them stand out to Eir. And I can cover our approach in general. And maybe if both of you want to add anything, please feel free to go ahead. But I think we've kind of established here that we want real problems to be solved with real solutions and based on science. So again, we're very open to absolutely different solutions, but the application needs to be convincing enough in a way that it is really solving a real problem. And we should see that you're able to execute things that you're promising to execute in your application. So it's, of course, based on your previous experience, based on the composition of the team, your advisor, your traction, but it should all tell, I think, a coherent story about what is the problem you're solving, how you're solving it, and why you're actually able to solve it compared to many other companies that are doing the same. And again, as any new area, I think that happens in any areas from, I don't know, blockchain to AI. When they started to be very popular, there start to be many different companies that try to say that they're solving some problems, but we are checking them very thoroughly to make sure that indeed those are real solutions and not just companies trying to, repurpose something that they already have and say that it's women's health, or, pretend that it's women's health and just, I don't know, sell AI wrappers. I don't know, both Mark and Marco, if you want to comment anything else at this point on this.
To the AI point, like at Suncoast, yeah, we won't underwrite anything that we think that Anthropic or OpenAI could decide they put a push out and it's gone. We want to have human in the loop whenever we can. Like we really like enhanced care management, for instance, but it's like there are people involved in these things. You can't replace kind of what Marco was saying. If you have an IP moat, you have a patent. I can't just decide I'm going to do an update and take away a patent. Like a patent's a very clear moat. Or if like we have a lot of things that are work in the clinical workflow where people are involved implementing the technology. And so I think to us, like we kind of have 3 Ps, like payer, provider, policy, and people, or plans, policy, and people, if you will. And so echoing everything she said, a lot of what's important to us is to make sure that as AI progresses, you still have a company Whereas I see like, like a lot of like drug discovery companies where we're just a little more skeptical of things like that, whether it's in women's health or something else, because anytime you're competing against a company with billions and billions of dollars, no matter how good you are, I'm just a little skeptical of your ability to execute for no fault of your own, but rather that capital intensity and capital velocity in life science means there are just certain plays where if people who are extremely well capitalized come in, they're probably going to win. But that doesn't mean there isn't a ton of room, and particularly in areas like women's health, the large players have traditionally been neglecting it. And because of the underallocation of the pipeline, that leads to arbitrage opportunities.
Thank you. Anything else you would like to comment, Marco?
Yeah, no, I'll just echo what Mark said. That I can basically echo on everything that he said on the topic. What I would like to add from our perspective is that I think one of the most challenging topic, especially for early stage founders, is to really demonstrate a deep understanding of why this solution is financially needed and why. Well, essentially, who's going to pay for it and why? Those are the two questions, right? And those all actually quite often remain unanswered, completely unanswered. And the better the founders can actually educate us, obviously, because we're not experts in these fields. You're experts in these fields. So if you can explain to us why do you believe that this solution actually has a financial incentive to pay, whether, I mean, regardless of the model, why, if it's a direct to consumer, why do you believe, or how have you substantiated that there's a willingness to pay in the consumer audience, or if it's a medical device, if it's sold to hospitals, or if it's a payer reimbursed product, why, from a health economic perspective, do you believe that this is a case financially worth investing in? Right. And that's maybe one thing that I would maybe hope to see more.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're all aligned on those points. And in general, it's probably not much different in women's health to any other companies or healthcare companies. Those are all usual points. We need to see that you're able to move your company forward, reach the objectives that you claim you want to reach, have the team to execute, have the skills to get the customers, have the science underneath, and prove your business model and business case. So that's pretty much universal across the areas, with, of course, some of the specific caveats in women's health when it comes to maybe education of patients in general, and of course some of the reimbursement models. And of course, during the program, we will cover a lot of those topics. We will always cover the topics of healthcare in general first, because obviously reimbursement is reimbursement, but then we will obviously focus all the time on women's health and specific challenges companies face, either with getting clinical evidence or getting reimbursement or even getting censored in social media. So all those topics will be covered during Eir program. So I'm looking through the questions now. There are a couple of logistics questions about how do I update your deck. To update your deck, please get in touch with Heta, who's helping in the chat here. You can send the deck to her, or you can also message us on LinkedIn, and we'll try to give you a new link to update your application. But in general, we are focused on the data that you submitted in the original application, but we will try to provide those opportunities if you think that this is really critical for you. There are questions about how other people can get involved in Eir, and of course, as an accelerator, we are focused on companies because our program needs to make sense to the companies that join. So we're not a venture studio, and we do have good partners of venture studios. So if you're interested maybe to look at your idea from the earlier stage and then find co-founders, then I would recommend to reach out to venture studios, and then Eir would be the next logical step for you. Otherwise, if you think that you can contribute maybe as a mentor, there is a form on our website. Please apply as a mentor and say where you could actually support those companies. And we have wonderful applications from mentors, and we will be getting in touch with them quite soon. But first, of course, we need to finalize our selection of the companies before we can accept mentors. There are some tricky questions here, of course, about the involvement of Bayer and Organon and other companies in the cohort. Well, that's a bit of a something that we not going to disclose very openly as far as the commitment of each partner and the modality of which we work with the partners. But I don't think we even need to, because we will anyway work with each company, each startup, I mean, case by case in terms of helping them with reaching out to the best investors or to the best partners in their case. Why? Because first, when we launched the Eir applications, I was thinking that we will get quite similar companies in terms of stage. The usual companies that apply to an accelerator are quite early. And also, still in my experience, there's quite a lot of digital companies applying to an accelerator, right? Because it's harder to accelerate a biotech, or like still maybe a little bit harder to accelerate medical device just because of the timelines. But we have received absolutely different applications. They come from quite early companies to actually quite advanced companies. And again, they do come from different areas. So something that we want to do, which will make me happy in terms of the cohort, but will make my life much more complex because I will need to work twice as hard to arrange a program for each founder. We will really focus on each founder individually. So we will arrange, of course, some of the common sessions on the topics like maybe, I don't know, US market, Finnish market, and then maybe communication and something that applies to all founders. But otherwise, when it comes to our partners, pharma companies or biobanks or other healthcare providers that are joining us, we will work case by case, because it always also depends so much on their motivation and whether you're solving the problem that is very pertinent to them. If you have a solution that can help scale their latest product that is in the market, it's of course much of a better chance they look at you now rather than later. So otherwise, of course, if they are on our website among the partners, it does mean that we work actively with them. So I leave it at this point. Let me see, what else do we have? I think some of the questions are a bit similar to what we have already discussed, so I might not really stop at all of them. I think we've discussed quite a bit about software and data companies. I don't know, guys, if you want to comment on anything about this. There is a question about whether software and data companies in women's health are a big enough problem and real business opportunity. I think we kind of talked about it.
Yeah, perhaps I could maybe add a perspective. I also read through the Q&A, and I think there were a lot of good questions. When it comes to that question on digital and data, yeah. I mean, it's like categorically that's a very difficult question to answer, because yes, obviously there are opportunities there in women's health, like in any other domain. But I guess the question is, again, coming back to that, I don't think the healthcare systems anywhere are too accustomed to anything else than episodic care. And I'm sorry, I just that's the way healthcare I think works right now, is more focused on episodic cares. And when we talk about a more holistic approach and sort of things, there was the question about sort of things that sit between conditions or things that sit between diagnostics, and that more of a holistic care approach. Yes, that's absolutely an interesting investment area, given that given that we given that we find the right payers for. And I think we need to think differently, because obviously we really know that healthcare isn't sort of wired right now to pay for holistic continuous care. It's more wired to pay for episodic care, and hence a lot of the investment, a lot of the value generated goes to more episodic treatments, episodic diagnostics. But that's an area, and again, for every founder focusing on that concept of more holistic continuous care, which is super interesting, I would urge to find good answers to the question in terms of who's the audience that's willing to pay. And it might be, for example, direct, it might be sort of a consumer business in the early stages, but sort of the find the audience that's initially willing to pay for something that actually makes a lot of intuitive sense, right? And that might then bring to the next level and to the next category of payers.
Thank you, Marco. Indeed.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo that like one thing that we're really interested in is who pays and who would buy the company. Like not many companies are gonna go to IPO, and it's great if you want to IPO, but like a lot of founders, like the more exit variety you have, the safer you are as an investment. And remember that VCs are always worried, what do our investors think? Like I have to defend every investment to our investors. And so like to his point about episodic care, at least like CPT codes in the US, like holistic medicine is not as clear sometimes in the reimbursement pathway, which doesn't mean it's not important, but it does mean that the financial case can have a higher bar to prove. And that is, of course, another risk. So if you're going to have holistic care, like I personally like to see a beachhead. Like I like to, like chronic pelvic pain is very interesting to me. CPP is like 18 different sub indications. You could start in endo, you could start in PMOS, you could start in fibroids. And if you did endo, the care pathways for fibroids or PMOS, they make a lot of sense. Or adenomyosis is like extremely close to endo anyway, and a lot of the care pathways. But to be able to have a clear beachhead also means that the KOLs and the scientific and medical advisory, like there really aren't a lot of, at least in CPP where I do a lot of work, there's not a lot of people who work across multiple conditions. So it's fantastic to be able to do holistic care. But if you're doing like a new diagnostic, a new therapeutic or med device, a lot of times having a clear indication saying this is where we're going to start. However, this segment and that segment and this other segment, if we hit this segment, will all be available really fast. I think of it like an archipelago. You go to one island and you set up camp on the island, and then you can get the surrounding islands and you just go over time and you expand. But I do think it's an easier story for a lot of investors, which is something I think about because like we're specialists. We understand women's health extremely well. Most investors are not. And so I'm not only like thinking, what are we underwriting? I always want to make sure that investors who understand a lot less than we do, or who don't care as much about women's health, don't see you as, oh, it's just a women's thing, but rather see you kind of, as Marco was saying earlier, as a life science thing, as a healthcare thing. And the traditional paradigm to everything he was saying is to be focused on one condition, episodic care, which isn't say we don't like holistic health. Jen loves holistic health, my GP. It's just the economic cases are definitely harder to articulate. And so if you can make that clear story, and to his point, if you can pull that together, that not only makes you stronger as a founder, but also like, I think helps you understand how to articulate not just to investors, but to external partners, to different KOLs, and just to anyone on the street, right? Like, what are you doing and why?
Thank you very much, both. I think it's flowing so well, and you just made my life easier. I can just record this and put it in the Eir platform as a session on fundraising and, approach to the companies that join us. But indeed, I think you gave a lot of valuable comments in general on the strategy and approach and things we have to consider in women's health. So I think we've tried to answer most of the questions, either by text or live, and maybe we can close with the last one here, also considering the timing. So let's just take this last question and then we can close the event. So the last one was about cases in women's health that kind of fall in between condition, but rather focus on a cross trajectory layer. And the question is whether this kind of companies that are solving women's problem that fall in between single conditions are hard to underwrite or are mispriced right now. And what do you think about that?
I think Mark just gave a fantastic answer actually to that question and used the island analogy, and I would fully agree. So yeah, it is a tricky business to underwrite unless you have that sort of structured approach in terms of where do I begin, where do I land next, and what's the ocean of opportunities around where I'm going to start. And I think that was fantastically put by Mark.
Thank you. I'm super pleased that 65 plus people who joined us today on Friday, and I'm really, really, really happy about how the discussion went. I really think that it was not just, investors trying to give founders some ideas and, trying to present their point of view, but actually really giving valuable advice and valuable points to the companies to implement. So thank you both so much. I'm really grateful for the ecosystem we're creating here. So as Marco mentioned, we've known each other for a while, and he was the first person I reached out to about Eir, and he was like saying immediately like, yes, we're on board and we're going to help you with the event. And then Mark joined us as an advisor and is super active with helping us with reviews, funders, and just helping us so amazingly as to even come to the Cold Finland in November. So absolutely helpful for all the network. And this is like our approach in general to all the people. You can see more of our mentors online with the, if you go to there and see the mentorship network, that's basically how we try to move forward and have all these valuable people helping us and helping the companies, which is also somehow answering the question about how the partners are involved. Thank you everyone so much. We again encourage you to still apply if you haven't applied to Eir. And we encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn at Eir page and stay in touch for future updates. And we will really do our best to advance with our reviews of application and let you know as soon as possible. So thank you so much. This webinar has been recorded and the video will be posted on our website too, so that you can get back to it if you think that you missed some answers. So have a nice weekend, everyone, and we'll be in touch very soon. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
y'all.